Hello and welcome to the Stack Magazine's podcast. My name is Stephen Watson and I run Stack, the independent magazine club that delivers a different publication to your door every month. In this episode, I'm speaking with Josh Jones and Chris Hassel, who both do a whole load of different things, including editing and publishing Ralph magazine. Josh, Chris, thank you very much for making time to speak with me.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So I normally start by asking about the magazine and saying, so tell me about this mag. But I feel like in this case, we sort of need to start with you two. So maybe you could start by telling me, how did you two end up coming together to make this thing?
Oh, who goes first then, Josh? I'll go. Well, we met over 20 years ago, I think.
See, 3 years ago.
Now, Josh has a calendar on his wall where he marks it. And yeah, Josh actually works for one of my clients, an agency called Cake, and we just stayed in touch on and off over the years. Josh bought a Jaguar car off me for £1, which you need to set up a Patreon, Steve, and we'll put that story in the Patreon episode. I didn't realize I sold it to him when I was drunk, and then he contacted me a few months later and said, by the way, I need that car now. And luckily I had it rotting in my car park. But anyway, and we, over the years, we've actually tried to spin up print-based Ralph projects. One was a particularly self-indulgent one about 10 years ago, probably, which was the story of Ralph and all the fun stuff we were doing and how we'd set up. And looking back over some of those PDFs now, yeah, self-indulgent doesn't even begin to cover it, but it was still fun. We've done lots of exciting things over our 2 decades of existence. And then it was beginning of 2024, and we were just, we'd been back in touch a bit more regularly, haven't we, in the year or so leading up to that. And it was like, let's just do it. Let's just make Ralph Mag. We had an internal magazine that we'd spun up to sort of bring our offices across Tokyo and the US and the UK and Mumbai, to share work we're doing and share stuff we're doing. And it just kind of became, again, this is a bit self-indulgent. Who gives a shit? How do we make this better? Because Ralph should be about fun stuff. And then I was like, oh, well, I'll loop in this chap, Josh Jones, that I know.
Chris had this strapline, which was pop culture for the fun of it, and he wanted to do something with that, basically. And we thought it was a really good line to run a magazine off. So we weren't hindered by release dates or films coming out, or people doing something in that moment. It was just pop culture, and it has to be fun is basically what runs through everything we do around. So it could be about anything, not just about music or film or gaming. Or we've got banger racing in New Zealand in the latest one, and this Nintendo themed members bar in Tokyo, and just everything it's just something that's got a fun spin to it. So it's quite a nice spine to have. Although we are thinking about changing the strapline. Because in a year or so, how can we go on to the next from that? So, but yeah, that's the sort of theme that runs through everything we do, which is really good. I found really exciting because I've been making and editing magazines for 20 years, and to have this thing, which is just really a blank sheet, really a blank sheet of paper to start with, but has to be fun. What's not a better brief than that? So yeah, it's been a fast 20 months.
Yeah, I think as well. It was almost, to some extent, what's the most extreme thing? An agency that over the past 5 to 10 years has become more and more social media driven and social media content and all this stuff we do for clients and fun clients, entertainment clients, Netflixes and Apples and all that sort of stuff. But what can we do that's ours that will drag us out of that a bit more and allow us to become involved in other areas beyond TV and film and a bit of music? I realized to my exhaustion that I love meeting people, and I know lots of people in food and drink, and then Josh, especially knows lots of people in comedy, and we all know people in music and film and stuff. And it's like, well, how do we kind of do something with that, something fun and something that's ours? And so it felt like, let's go for something that is almost the opposite of social media, and let's do it as a print mag, and make a splash doing that. So that was how it sort of kicked off.
So we should explain. So Ralph sorry, Chris, Ralph is your agency. So Ralph magazine is published by Ralph, a creative agency.
Yeah, Ralph started here in London 2005, and then we're very lucky over 2 decades of working mainly in the entertainment industry, and having existed for over 20 years now, doing lots of stuff, often in the digital space, but started off making websites and games, then did lots of viral campaigns. And then in the past decade, it's sort of lent more and more into social stuff, especially since COVID. So that's why the magazine is like, let's publish this, it's ours, and let's print it so that it's going back to some tangibility and the excitement of creating something physical. And that's why Josh got involved, because he knows how to do that. Um, and, uh, and yeah, really make a point of actually our history, all of the stuff we've done over the many years we've existed. Um, let's break out of the shackles of like social media, which especially since COVID, like I say, has restricted things somewhat. So yeah, it's published by Ralph, but it's also more than just an agency publishing a magazine. It's an agency evolving into being something more than an agency. And that's where the magazine's exciting, the response we're getting to it, the people we're working with, and then what we're working on as our digital strategy, essentially. And I say digital very purposefully, as in it's not just what's our social strategy for our magazine. It's like, what do we want to be creating? And we want to be creating entertainment, both non-fiction and fiction, and building out our own products in terms of audio visual stuff as well. And the magazine is the heart and soul to build out that from. So it's a real evolution of what the agency has been. I've always liked to think it's more than just an ad. We've never been an ad agency or anything. It's always been about creating stuff that people love and share. And so the mag is really key to that evolution.
And so, Josh, so Chris just kind of alluded to your many years of magazine making. So when Chris decided we need to make a magazine now, he went to you because, tell us, give us your CV. What you spent the last 20 years doing?
So I've been making magazines or editing and then making magazines purposely since 2015. I got lost in the online world for a bit, editing websites, which I find extremely boring. And I've talked about that before. And like I said in interviews before, no one ever sniffs an iPad when you launch a website, but when you make a magazine, the first thing people do is smell the pages. So I left. I was a music editor at Red Bull, which I didn't enjoy at all, and then just started getting into just print stuff. Just all I do. So I made the show program for Dismaland, the big art show down in Weston-super-Mare. I had my own zine called Pavement Liquor, which I started in 2003 with James Lee Duffy, who worked at Cake, where I met Chris. And that's just sort of gone on and on and on. We've had various sort of contributors from the art world, from Banksy and Jamie Hewlett, Shepard Fairey, lots of people like that have done stuff. So that sort of kept me ticking over in the print sphere until I quit sort of online things. And then I was the editor for Pike's Hotel magazine, which is a lot of fun, the sort of legendary hedonistic hotel in Ibiza. I did that for 4 years. I was editor of Special Request magazine with Paul Sethi, who has featured on Stack, and Mark Sethi was the publisher. That was a fun mag. Trying to remember them all. Just get to COVID. In COVID, I got a message from Marvin Scott Jarrett, who's the famous founder of Nylon and Raygun, most famously, that he did with David Carson and then beyond. And he was starting a new magazine called Marvin, which is this oversized luxury print music and fashion and style mag. So I was exec editor from launch until issue 8 of that, which was 2 years. And I did a big thing for Interscope with them, which got nominated for Grammy, which was good. Running through this. Then while I was doing that, I got asked by Church of London here in London to edit Sandwich magazine, which I'm technically still editor of. I've done 5 issues of that, but it's sort of on hiatus at the moment until I get some brand sponsorship. And then they asked me to edit Huck, which I'd written for issue 5, and now it's on issue 83. And in between that, Chris also asked me to start this magazine. So loads of magazines and books. I've done a bunch of books as well for the Saatchi Gallery and North Face. I did a big one for. I've done a couple of my own. I did one on the Dragon Bar, the famous street art bar. Running out of things here. I haven't prepared my CV
Well, and
part.
so people may remember you on this podcast talking about your book. What's it called? So you want to make?
Yeah, I made a book called Just Make Your Magazine.
Just Make Your Magazine.
Yeah, and it was like a sort of field guide to how to make your own magazine, because everyone wants to make a magazine now at the moment, it seems. So I did a very sort of step by step. This is what I've learned. You could go and make your own, which I've sold loads of, which is good. I sell most direct online, and it's a handy little A5 number. If you Google that, Josh Jennings, you can. There's a few left, so go and do that.
All right, so
I've got one on my desk that when I've finished it, I can fire Josh. I won't need him anymore. I've almost finished it.
Oh, really,
all right,
really
so we've got Chris. You're in Ralph. You see the opportunity for making a magazine. Josh, you're the man who makes magazines. So you two come together. Now, I remember, so like when you launched in 2024, I seem to remember you talking about it as being like a return to the magazines of like the 90s. So the idea of just making something for fun, basically. Am I imagining that, or was that part of it in the first
No, that
place?
was that really hot. We had a block party next door to the Ralph offices, which was extremely warm. Do you remember? It's like 35 degrees. But we try and have like a fun party for everything with barbecue and Alexis from Hot Chip DJ. It was a good party, wasn't it? But yeah, it wasn't to recreate the 90s. It was to try and channel the sort of chaotic fun of the 90s. And, like the early MTV aesthetic, just the sort of optimism, and we can try this, and not everything needs to be super polished. If you look at the graphics from all of that era, things were just done, and they were done, I guess, sort of cheaply in that time. But they didn't have to go through several rounds of amends and sign-offs and stuff. It was just like, let's just try it and do something. We can polish it if it's successful. So that's sort of what we've done. And we've got James Lee Duffy, who I do paper liquor with. He's the art director here, who's unusually really for an art director. He used to work in a print house, actually physically typesetting. He's done the hands-on things. He gets every aspect of print. And the science of how colours work and printing and stuff. So he lived through that. He worked at I can't remember what it was. He worked in Sydney during those times, working for magazines. So he gets that. He remembers it, and also can pull it together in a contemporary way. We want to we're not nostalgic for the 90s in any way, but we want that sort of try everything. And there's no algorithm here. We're not going to just do everything on furniture. We're not going to do everything. It's just, so like I said, in this one, we've got this Nintendo bar in Tokyo, and then this banger racing community in the middle of nowhere in an island off New Zealand. Because what magazines should be about discovery, isn't it? It shouldn't be about just reading stuff That's where we've all got stuck in this world where a computer decides what we think we should discover, and which shouldn't be. You should pick something up and try something new. After all, what does magazine mean? Something that contains something explosive, isn't it, Steve? So yeah, so that's.
I think that's almost leads to one of the sort of challenges as well that we have with Ralph, is actually explaining that we aren't just for a niche. It feels like that even in the magazine world, that's become slightly odd, because you have some fabulous mags made for communities, specific communities, whereas what we want to do with Ralph magazine and the wider Ralph world stuff is create a world that is about joy and the discovery. To Josh's point, it's about discovery. That's what magazines, I don't know if you know this, Steve, but you flick through them and you discover things. And it's not something you can really do digitally. So, with our Ralph World digital stuff, we want to then actually bring you stuff, again, like in an early days MTV way, that is a bit more just creative and risky. I don't mean risky in like sexually, I mean, it's like risky in terms of like, is it going to work creatively? And that's what we're doing with the mag as well, is like, we've got stuff we're just trying out. We're not locked into any specific formats. We have got some repeating formats because they really sell the idea of what Ralph stands for. Like, don't Google this is our facts that we have, and I'm not even sure if putting the quotes around it is correct, because they might be facts. The whole point is don't Google it, just have a conversation about it, and that's what Ralph's about, and so it's actually creating a brand and a magazine that is mixing a bunch of things together. In itself is quite nostalgic. Like, this is for if you want to have a smash hit style music interview with an upcoming artist or an established artist, or we've got our deep dives on music, or you've got a few comics thrown in there, and we've got random reviews of petrol station perfumes and that sort of, so it's just there's a lot of really great deep dives into, as Josh has mentioned, the secret Nintendo bar in Tokyo, and some great writing, some of it about scenes and communities and goes quite deep, some of it silly things like commentary on scarecrows in a village in somewhere in England. I've forgotten where it is, Josh, but it's like written by Giles Hattersley.
So I was going to say, we've got like our writers contribute to this and all contributors actually really good. There's a scarecrow festival called Gallybaggers down in some village in the Isle of Wight, and we had a really good photographer, Scott Lyon, shoot them. And then I thought, it's a good photo story, but how can we make that better? So I asked Giles Hattersley, the exec editor of British Vogue, to do his fashion critique on it, and it was so funny. I've seen this event actually came over when I was reading it. Thought I'd had bad news because it looked like I was crying. But actually, it's an issue too. You should dig it out. It's really funny. But then, we've had James Brown, the infamous James Brown of Xene Age Kicks, but loaded Fame to the Enemy. He did a travel log to Naoshima Island, this incredible art island in Japan. Ivan Prico, who until recently was editor-in-chief of Juxtapose, has just started his own thing up, Unibrow. There's a photographer who takes really, really good photos of hand dryers around the world. And so I got him to do an art, what does this mean in the art sense? And he sort of brought a lot to do into that. Hannah Crosby, who is a wonderful writer, she is now, I think she was the Guardian wine critic. I think she's now Observer drinks columnist. She was in Tokyo, and I said, what do you want to do in Tokyo? And she went, there's this Muscle Girls bar, which is quite viral, but it's basically a bunch of female bodybuilders, and they serve you, and you can pay them to kick you in the butt or slap you in the face or pick you up. So she went down there and did a brilliant report on it, but from her point of view and stuff. So, we have all these writers because we give a bit of freedom basically to write about Cameron Cook, who's the senior editor at High Sobriety, just wrote about. I worked at Suck magazine. I forgot that's how I got into magazines. I was the UK editor of that. He was the exec editor in New York, and so we did a deep dive in this latest issue, this one, on what was it like living in post-Strokes New York, and why it was such an optimistic feel of all this cool music. And he was out every night at all these gigs, so he got to write a sort of POV on that. So yeah, our contributor level is pretty high, but we also looking for lots of new people as well. I've sort of been following, so it's really nice to be able to commission someone that I've seen, and I'm still not really taking pictures, but I never really have, because you spend a lot of time when it's still a small team here. You spend a lot of time replying to pictures as to why you can't run that story, and then you realise most of the day's gone. So I don't really advertise. A few people send me stuff, but yeah, still not quite at pitch level. I sort of have it in my head and then commission.
I'm interested in the fact. So both of you have talked about MTV so far, and in the issue that I've got, so issue 6. There's a really interesting kind of post-mortem of MTV written by someone with like a doctorate in MTV, which I didn't know that was possible. Obviously, so MTV is no more. Like the world has moved on from that. And I mean, a lot of people would say that print's in the same place. Like you're doing, by choosing to focus on print, you're like opening your arms to a whole load of difficulties and troubles. Like, what's the sort of like, what's the attraction to print with what you're trying to do with this?
We want to stand for something. We want to stand for being led by creativity and joy and working with people who want to work with us for those same reasons. So yeah, you're right to say that working in print and having a magazine opens up, a cupboard full of problems. But for us, it's because we want to make it clear what we stand for. So, the point of the mag is not to build a business out of a print magazine. It's to build a brand that stands for being creative led. It makes a point of not being led by the algorithms. And the challenge for us is building that brand and staying true to it. Like often businesses in every walk of life, but especially entertainment and media and that sort of stuff, essentially are built on top of the social media platforms, and that isn't what we want to do. It's how do we play the game where you use these platforms where a lot of people are at the moment, but you make it clear what you stand for, and that you're not building the business on top of those platforms, because for me, you're then at the whim of those platforms and the algorithms. And I know the algorithms banded around a lot as a word, and I certainly am one of the worst for doing that. But if you build your business on top of someone else's, you then have to essentially do what they say. And whether the people that run those platforms can blame the algorithms that they don't really know how they work themselves anymore, whatever, if you build your business on top of their business, you then have to do what the algorithms say, because then you go, well, that's getting views, that's not getting views, oh well, let's do the one. And it's really hard to avoid those conversations. I see it happen every day in Ralph, external to Ralph. Oh well, we need to shorten that, or that didn't work within a week, so we need to get rid of that. And the MTV reference it's very important to say it's the early days MTV. And I know of people that were working there in the fairly early days, the kind of 90s, early 90s, that sort of stuff, mid 90s, which I know there were earlier days than that, but that kind of heyday where they were run by creative and they did some really creative stuff. You read the article in Ralph issue 6 and you go, oh yeah, I forgot all of this. And then actually some other sort of research we've done into animated projects which we're developing, and we have comics in the mag, and we're going to be increasing that as our animated concepts are developing, and we want to develop them in print as well. And then you go, oh, Beavis and Butthead, that was MTV, relatively early days. And then you remember, well, what the format was, and it was essentially like Gogglebox. Beavis and Butthead were sat on the sofa critiquing, often probably in ways that you wouldn't do nowadays. It's not particularly PC, but critiquing music videos. And God, that's great. God, that's great. I hadn't forgotten Beavis and Butthead, but I'd forgotten the starting point of them and how clever that is, both from a production point of view, less animation if you keep cutting to the music videos, but also just building on what they had as a brand, but taking them into original programming, scripted stuff. So that's why we keep looking to, as Josh said before, we're not nostalgic for the 90s. We're not trying to recreate that, but there's an attitude in terms of creative led exploration that we want to do. And if you build your business on social media, which by its very nature is driven by the robots, then it doesn't really encourage creative exploration. It happens, but you've got to be really lucky for it to happen. And I'd even go as far as saying that's probably not true. It doesn't really happen. It's creative exploration is about giving stuff time to breathe, allowing people to discover it, allowing it to evolve, and believing in it because it's fun and you want it to exist. And the magazine is a great format to do that in. And even the parameters of it exists in real life. It goes to print and it's like you can't change it. Again, Steve, I don't know if you know this about magazines, but you can't change them after they're printed. So that's just an exciting guardrail as well, or parameters to work within. And it's then how do we take that attitude and do it with the digital stuff we're creating, where you aren't just constantly evolving it based on data, and data that in my opinion, and I think it's hard to argue against this, doesn't define actually what joy is and what people really want. I don't think, if you've got the same kind of data defining the news that people look at and the horrible things that you get on those platforms that you look at because the humans are generally drawn to clickbaity stuff, you can't then use that data to say, well, that just also it tells us what people love. I don't think it's not the case. It would mean that people love terrible pictures from war zones. People don't love that stuff, and yet that's what we're applying to entertainment and everything. And so we don't want to be led by that. And yeah, the mag is a perfect way of not being, because it goes to a printer's, and as Josh said, it smells nice.
So you're kind of like nearly 18 months into this now. Is coming up on 2 years anyway. When you look back at the first issue, can you see Ralph the magazine changing along the way?
Yeah, it's definitely evolving, but I think it's definitely there's more. I don't know. There was a small bit, maybe issue 5 and 6, where I felt maybe what I said to Chris when I started was I didn't want to get stuck in a rut, because it's very easy as an editor is to go, well, I just need these sections at the front done, and I need these bits at the back done, and then you get 3 bits to do what you want with in the middle, for instance. And that's not how I like to work. So I just felt maybe between 4, 5, and 6, I could feel myself going, well, I just need to paint my numbers to get those, to tick the boxes. I've got really coming up with them now. But yeah, just then you got the magazine done, you can move on because it's quarterly. You don't really rest between them. So I feel like with 6 and 7, definitely we moved away from that. I sort of swerved away. But Duffy, the art director, he's really sort of, one, he bought a new computer, so it's much faster. And two, in issue 6, he broke his leg really badly. So issue 6, he did mainly on morphine. But I think that might have opened his mind a bit, because issue 7 is even more in your face. There's a lot. It's purposely chaotic design-wise. I think Duffy, in his sort of experience, was seeing a lot. If you look at a lot of magazines, there's a lot of measured spaces and white spaces. It's quite calm when you read through things, because that's calm is beautiful and people want to look at that. But this is a bit more messy, and it's like, I put that all on. And I think we could probably even go a bit messier, but that's sort of, we've kept the energy, maybe sort of had to catch our breath halfway through, but it's definitely the energy there. But other than we dropped the font size down a bit, because issue 1 was a little bit too big, wasn't it? When I was
That's funny. It's normally the other way around. You normally get people going we published our first issue and realized that we wanted to fit so many words and you couldn't read any of them, so we've had to make the point size a bit bigger. So you have got this evolution going through the issues. Is it yet doing the thing of helping to point you kind of in the direction of where Ralph as a whole is going to go? So if this print magazine is at the core of what the business is doing, is it giving you those kind of signals of sort of the direction to go in?
I think it's opening up lots of interesting conversations. That's getting stronger and stronger the longer the more issues we get done, and the more validation as an actual publication. Where we're at the moment is really having to clarify its purpose for the reader, and I think that's where we've actually created a mountain for ourselves in our ambition of what it's about and what Ralph World is about. Because again, it comes back to that people like to go, oh, who's this for exactly? And it's like, oh, it's for people that love architecture. It's for people that love whatever, anime, and it's like, no, Ralph is for more of an attitude of wanting a break from everything, and it is, again, we're not anti-tech. We're actually working on some really technically fun things and a few AI experiments, not for creative process, but for, apps and games and silly things. Again, where the internet and where tech was kind of 10 years ago, where it's like there's lots of fun stuff. When the iPhone first came out, when the iPhone App Store first came out, that Carling iPint that everyone had, where it's like, look at me, I'm drinking a pint. It's like, where did that fun go with tech? Like, that's
True.
So we love tech. So we're working on some things like that, that are just fun things with tech and with AI. We created an app actually to roast the Super Bowl ads. Our innovation team in the US created. You just point your phone at the adverts, and it would give you a really snarky kind of roast of them. You can actually point it at anything, and it will roast it. And so what I'd say we're finding is, though, that selling something that is more of a kind of attitude, and as I say, a break from how life is nowadays, all of the channels of communication, all of the algorithm-led stuff, and the addiction that we're just constantly being battered to not lose, really. It's like the world, it's like you're trying to give up smoking, and actually the world's just going, why are you doing that? Like, everyone smokes, it's fun, everyone does it, and you're like, I don't want to. It's like, well, you have to. In fact, to come into this bar, you have to smoke. So that's an interesting challenge. We're kind of, I mean, that sounds like quite a fun bar, but it's sort of, it's like we're pushing against that, even though I think that is breaking down. It is, people are starting to think that the new cool is being offline, or certainly not on social platforms. I have my phone is a non-iPhone now, which people kind of go, what is that? And then that opens up the conversation when they go, actually, yeah, I've deleted Instagram off my phone, or, actually, yeah, I'm really trying to leave it out of my bedroom. All that sort of stuff that has been talked about for a few years now, but it feels this year that it's really becoming a movement, and it's something that's important for us to get across. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, Steve, but it's like the mag is really helping us hone that messaging and what we stand for. And if anything, from Ralph over the rest of 2026, I think you're going to see us being a bit more clear in what we stand for, and what we offer our audience. And whilst we want to do all of that in a joyous, fun way, because that's what we are as a brand. So we want to stand for something, and that is coming together, doing more events like the events you came to. We're talking about making that a regular thing. The Ralph community can come and connect with other people and get subsidized booze and have some yummy food, and just do things for the fun of it. And that's what it comes back to. Pop culture for the fun of it is still applicable, even if we are working on changing it. That's purely from a kind of marketing point of view. We need to be more explicit about what we want to offer you, the reader. But pop culture for the fun of it is still the sentiment of all of it. It's like, this is fun. This should all be fun.
We can enjoy it.
And we can enjoy it. And in a way, there's no point if we're not. It's like there's lots of terrible things happening in the world, and they need us to be working on sorting them out. But it doesn't mean that every point of our life needs to be about that. And it doesn't mean that every interaction with other humans needs to be about that. Because if it does, what are we doing? Well, it's like there has to be joy. There has to be the light with the dark. And I think one of the issues with the setup of media and technology and stuff at the moment is that the dark just is all there all day. And, the news and all of the crap going on with the news around the world, which, as I say, is superbly important. It's so important. But we sit at work and it hits us at work every 5 minutes. And it's like, I can't even come to work and have a break from what madness Trump is doing or what war has broken out. And I think that's then distracting us from the other elements of life that are really important. And being creative and having fun and seeing what happens when you just try and make stuff is part of that promise we want to have.
Listen, the strapline's changing. It sounds like there's lots of plans for stuff that's going to come, but it sounds like it's all going to be pegged by this idea of having fun. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out of the new version of Ralph.
Yeah, one of the things we thought of over Christmas was sort of an unwritten rule that everyone on the cover is got to be fun or funny. They don't have to be a comedian. We have had Taskmaster and then Joanne McNally in a row, but it's just a nice steer that you can say to a publicist, well, are they funny? That, like, is the person funny? Because then we want the interview to be a fun thing to read, not just someone, who's really cool and in a film. But then we'll just get the same thing as every other magazine if we do that. So that's what we're doing.
I mean, it seems kind of lazy to me, Josh. They're just interviewing funny people and letting them do all the hard work of being funny.
It's the business model, Steve.
Listen, thanks so much for taking the time to tell me about it.
My pleasure.
Cheers, fellas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.